A stranger paid for her groceries. What he said still echoes in her heart. She stood there, frozen, while the line behind her kept moving. One hand held her toddler's squirming body. The other held a small stack of coupons and 3 crumpled bills that had already been smoothed out and folded again too many times. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, casting an artificial glow over the checkout lane. Emma had done everything she could to prepare for this moment. She'd calculated her total 3 times in her head while walking through the aisles. She picked up a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, baby wipes, a small bag of rice, and a jar of peanut butter. That was it. Nothing more. Her son, Mason, was getting restless in her arms. He whined softly, then louder, tugging at the sleeve of her hoodie. Emma whispered, "Just a few more minutes, baby. Almost done." She shifted him to her hip and reached into her pocket for her debit card. But she already knew. The balance was low, too low. The cashier, a young woman with tired eyes and chipped nail polish, began scanning the items. One beep at a time. Emma's stomach tightened with each sound. She avoided eye contact. She didn't want to see pity. Or worse, annoyance. The screen flashed the total, $38.71. Emma gave a tight smile, pretending it was fine. She slid her debit card and hoped, really hoped, maybe a deposit from her temp job had gone through. Declined. She laughed quietly, a little too loud. "Sorry, let me try again," she said, knowing it wouldn't work. She didn't want to hold up the line, but there was no one left to hold off reality either. She pulled out the bills. The cashier counted them. $17. Emma already knew. "Okay," Emma said, setting Mason down for a second. He clung to her leg. She started removing items. "Let's take off the baby wipes. And the rice." Her voice cracked slightly, but she smiled again. Too big this time. Too forced. Someone coughed behind her. Another person shifted impatiently. She reached for the peanut butter next. Her hands were shaking. She thought about how she used to go grocery shopping without thinking, how quickly that changed. Then a voice spoke up. Calm, steady. "I've got it." Emma turned. A man, maybe in his 40s, stood behind her. He had a short beard, a plain t-shirt, and a face that didn't flinch when she looked at him. "I'll cover it," he said again. Emma blinked. "Oh, no, you don't have to. It's fine. I can just—" He was already stepping forward. He handed his card to the cashier. "Please, let me." She didn't know what to say. The cashier hesitated, then took it. The items were scanned again. This time, all of them. Mason sat on the floor, watching with curious eyes. Emma felt every second stretch out too long. The man didn't look away. He wasn't smiling out of politeness. He wasn't pretending this was nothing. He just stood there with that steady face, like someone who had seen this before. When it was done, he turned to Emma. "You're doing your best. That's enough." Her throat tightened. She nodded quickly, trying to hold it in. "Thank you, really. I don't even know your name." He gave a small shrug. "Doesn't matter. Just keep going. That's what matters." Then he picked up his own basket and moved to the next lane. Emma stood there, groceries bagged, Mason clinging to her leg. It took her a few seconds to realize she was still standing in place. No one else said anything. She finally whispered, "Come on, baby," and walked out of the store into the heat of the afternoon sun. But the coolness of the stranger's words stayed with her. She didn't even fully understand why. Not yet. The automatic doors slid open behind her, but Emma didn't move right away. She stood just outside the store with 2 grocery bags in one hand and her son's tiny fingers wrapped around the other. The cars in the parking lot moved slowly, but everything else felt still. Her heart was still racing. Not from embarrassment anymore, but from something else. Disbelief. Confusion. Relief. Emma lowered herself onto the short concrete ledge near the bike racks. Mason climbed into her lap without needing to be told. She wrapped her arms around him, resting her chin gently on the top of his soft curls. The bags sat next to her. Everything was still in there. The baby wipes, the peanut butter, the milk. Things she would have left behind if that man hadn't stepped forward. She stared straight ahead, not really seeing anything. Cars pulled in and out. A cart clanged against a metal rack. Someone laughed behind her. But all of it felt distant. It had happened so fast. The man didn't hesitate. He didn't ask questions or look unsure. He saw what was happening, and he acted. Emma thought back to how hard she tried to make that moment feel normal inside the store. The way she smiled too much. The way she tried to act like she had it under control while removing items from the counter like it wasn't crushing her inside. But he saw through it. And what he said, it wasn't just polite. It wasn't one of those no problem or happy to help phrases people toss around when they're uncomfortable. It was personal. It was specific. You're doing your best. That's enough. She kept hearing it, word for word. It didn't make her cry in the moment. But now, sitting outside with her son warm against her chest, the tears came quietly. She didn't make a sound, just let them fall. Because lately no one had said that to her. No one had said it was enough. She wiped her face quickly with her sleeve. Mason looked up at her. "Mommy?" "Yeah, baby," she whispered, smoothing back his hair. "We're okay. We're really okay." And somehow she meant it. Emma reached for one of the bags and peeked inside. The groceries were just groceries, but today they felt like something else. Proof that someone out there saw her trying. Proof that kindness wasn't gone. She knew how often people walked past others in moments like that, pretending not to see or assuming someone else would step in. But he didn't walk past. She stood up, brushing off the back of her jeans. "All right, time to go," she said softly. She walked slowly to her car, one hand holding Mason's, the other gripping the bags tighter than she needed to. It was like she was afraid they'd disappear if she loosened her grip. Inside the car, Mason was already dozing off in his car seat. She adjusted the strap gently and paused for a second, watching him. He didn't know what just happened, but one day, he would. Emma took out her phone, not to take a picture, not to text anyone. She opened the Notes app and typed just one sentence. "It's not about the money. It's about how hard you're trying." She didn't want to forget. As she pulled out of the parking lot, she glanced once more toward the store entrance. The man was gone. But what he said wasn't. And she had a feeling it never would be. Emma returned to the store 2 days later. Not because she needed more groceries, but because something inside her told her to. She had replayed that moment too many times since it happened. The stranger's voice, the sound of the register beeping, the way he said those words, not rushed, not thrown out to make her feel better, but deliberate, real. She didn't expect to see him again. She wasn't even sure what she would say if she did. But still, she found herself walking back into the same store, almost retracing her steps. She kept Mason home this time. A neighbor had offered to watch him for an hour. It gave her space to think. Emma walked slowly through the aisles, pushing an empty cart. She didn't need much, just a few snacks for Mason and some shampoo. But this wasn't about shopping. It felt more like searching. She passed by the peanut butter shelf and paused without meaning to. It was full again. All the same jars, neatly stacked, as if they hadn't meant anything at all 2 days ago. But she remembered what they had meant to her. When she reached the checkout area, she didn't recognize the cashier from before. The lanes were busier now. More people. More noise. She got in line, clutching a small basket of items she could easily afford today. The cart felt light, but her chest still felt heavy. Then, just as she stepped forward to the register, she saw him. 3 lanes over. Same plain t-shirt. Same calm face. Emma froze. Her basket hung from her fingers, suddenly weightless. She watched him place a few items on the conveyor belt. Nothing unusual. Milk, eggs, a box of cereal. It was him. No doubt. Without thinking, she stepped out of her line and walked toward his. She didn't care that she'd lose her spot. She didn't care if people thought she was being strange. She just knew she had to say something. His eyes met hers as she got closer. For a moment, he didn't react. Then recognition lit up his face. "Hi," he said, simple and steady. Emma took a breath. "I didn't get to say thank you. Not really." He smiled, just a little. "You don't have to." "I do," she said more firmly. "I do. You didn't know me. You didn't have to say anything. But you did. And I've been thinking about it ever since." He nodded. "I meant it." Emma looked down for a second. "It wasn't just that you paid. It was what you said. About trying. No one said that to me in a long time." "I saw it in your face," he said. "You were holding it together. I've been there. I know what that looks like." His tone didn't shift. He didn't try to make it dramatic or soft. Just honest. She felt the sting of tears again, but blinked them back. She didn't want to cry in front of him. Not here. "Can I ask your name?" she said. "David," he replied. "I'm Emma." They stood there for a second longer. The beeping of another register broke the silence between them. "Thank you, David," she said, "for what you did, for what you said. I won't forget it." He picked up his bag of groceries. "Just promise you'll remember it next time things get hard. You're doing more than enough." And with that, he gave her a short nod and walked out of the store. Emma stood there for a moment, watching the door close behind him again. He hadn't done it for attention. He didn't want praise. But he gave her something that day, something even more valuable than groceries. He gave her back a piece of herself she thought she'd lost. Emma sat on the edge of her bed later that night, a warm cup of tea in her hands, long since gone cold. The room was quiet. Mason had fallen asleep 2 hours earlier, his favorite blanket pulled up to his chin, his soft breathing steady. The apartment was dim, but not dark. A small lamp in the corner gave off just enough light for her to sit and think without feeling alone. She kept hearing it again, over and over. "It's not about the money. It's about how hard you're trying." She had told herself that before. Whispered it while folding laundry at midnight, while filling out job applications during nap time, while skipping meals so Mason wouldn't have to. But when she said it, it felt like a wish. When David said it, it felt like a truth. It wasn't the act of paying that had stayed with her. It was the way he saw her, really saw her. Not as someone who couldn't pay for groceries, not as someone failing, but as someone trying. Someone holding the weight of the world with tired arms and still refusing to drop it. That's what caught her off guard. Emma had spent so much time pretending everything was fine, smiling when she was exhausted, laughing when she wanted to cry. She had gotten good at hiding the cracks. But David noticed. In a few seconds, with a few words, he made it clear he understood. She hadn't felt that in a long time. Emma leaned back against the wall, still holding the tea. She thought about how quiet her phone had been lately. Friends had drifted. Family was far away. Most days, her world was just her and Mason. And when you're alone for long enough, you start to believe the silence means you don't matter. But one stranger in a grocery store had undone that feeling. And he didn't try to fix her life. He didn't promise things would get better. He just said that trying was enough, that she was enough. Emma set the cup down and picked up her notebook. She didn't write in it every day, but tonight she needed to. She flipped past pages filled with job interview notes, budgeting lists, and quick reminders. Pay electric bill, call daycare, Mason's vitamins. She turned to a blank page and wrote slowly, carefully. July 12th. Today, someone reminded me that I'm doing my best, and that's worth something. She paused, then added, I believed him. It surprised her to admit that, but it was true. She closed the notebook and placed it on the nightstand. Then she reached for Mason's baby monitor, checked the volume, and turned off the lamp. The room fell into darkness, but it didn't feel heavy. Emma lay down and pulled the blanket up to her chest. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. The job interviews were still uncertain. The bills weren't going anywhere. But something had changed. She felt a little lighter, not because her life had suddenly gotten easier, but because someone had reminded her why she was fighting so hard in the first place. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, sleep came quickly. It wasn't about the groceries. It never had been. It was about being seen, being told that effort matters, even when the results haven't come yet. And as the night settled in around her, Emma held on to that one simple truth, like a lifeline. The morning sunlight pushed gently through the blinds, casting thin lines of gold across the floor. Emma stood barefoot in the kitchen, holding a spoon in one hand and watching Mason eat from a small bowl at the table. The peanut butter from 2 days ago was now part of his breakfast, spread over a slice of toast, cut into quarters just how he liked it. He kicked his feet under the table, humming softly between bites. He didn't know how close that food had come to being left on the store counter. Emma stirred her coffee slowly, not really drinking it. Her eyes drifted between the fridge and the cupboard, where the few groceries David had paid for now sat like quiet reminders. She wasn't trying to be dramatic. They were just groceries. But in that moment, they had meant more than what they were. They were peace of mind. They were one less thing to worry about. And maybe most of all, they were proof that people still showed up when you least expected it. Emma sat down across from Mason, finally taking a sip of the now lukewarm coffee. She watched him carefully stack 2 pieces of toast together before taking a big bite. You like it? She asked. He nodded with a mouthful, then said, Is there more? Emma smiled. There's more. She got up and made another slice, this time adding a few banana slices on top, Mason's favorite. As she moved around the kitchen, she noticed how much her body still carried tension, like it hadn't gotten the message yet that everything was okay. Not fixed, not perfect, but okay. She had lived in survival mode for so long it was hard to let her guard down. Even now, even after the kindness. But something was different. That man, David, had no reason to help her. He didn't know her. He didn't expect anything in return. It wasn't just a good deed. It was a message. You're not invisible. You're not a burden. You're doing your best. And for Emma, that meant more than any full cart ever could. She sat back down at the table, resting her chin in her hand while Mason ate. He looked up at her. Why are you smiling? She hadn't realized she was. I'm just happy you're enjoying your food. Can we go to the park after? He asked. Emma nodded. Yeah, we can do that. There had been days when even a short walk to the park felt like too much, too exhausting, too heavy with everything she had to carry inside. But not today. Today she felt a little lighter. After breakfast, Emma cleaned the dishes while Mason played with his toy cars on the floor. She glanced at the calendar hanging on the wall. Rent was due in a week. She still didn't know if the job interview she had last Friday would lead to anything, but she wasn't panicking. Not yet. Because for the first time in a while, she felt capable again. Not because her problems had disappeared, but because someone had reminded her that being in a hard place didn't mean she was failing. She picked up her phone and opened the Notes app again. She added another line beneath what she wrote the night before. Today, I remembered I'm stronger than I think, and I'm not alone, even when it feels like I am. She hit save and locked the screen. Outside, birds chirped faintly under the hum of the morning. The world was moving, and Emma was moving with it. As she helped Mason put on his shoes, she thought again about that grocery store, about the moment she almost broke in front of strangers, and how one person's voice had pulled her back. It wasn't about the peanut butter. It was about what it meant to be seen, and what it does to a person when they feel, even for a moment, that they matter. That night, after Mason had gone to bed, Emma sat alone at the kitchen table. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the apartment. Her hands rested on the smooth wooden surface, palms flat, as if bracing herself. She looked around the room, the same chipped cabinets, the same second-hand chairs, the same little magnet on the fridge with a smiling sun and the words, "You've got this." David didn't know any of this. He didn't know that Emma had sold her favorite coat last month just to afford diapers and formula. He didn't know she'd gone to bed hungry more than once this year, telling herself she wasn't really hungry, just tired. He didn't know that she sometimes skipped lunch so that Mason could have a snack at daycare, or that she'd cried in the bathroom at a community center after her food stamps were delayed. He didn't know she'd stood in front of the mirror too many times, wondering how she had ended up here, wondering if maybe she'd done something wrong to deserve the struggle. And he didn't know that on the day he stepped forward, she was hanging on by a thread. That morning, she had debated going to the store at all. Her checking account had $22 in change. Her gas tank was barely at a quarter. But she needed milk, and Mason was down to his last diaper. She told herself she'd figure out the rest later. She stood in the shower that morning, staring at the tile, too tired to cry, too numb to feel anything. She dried off in silence and packed Mason's diaper bag without saying a word. She had promised herself she wouldn't break down in public, not in front of Mason, not in front of anyone. She was tired of being seen as someone who couldn't hold it together. And then the card got declined. It was like time stopped. The air in her chest tightened. She remembered the exact feeling of panic pressing into her ribs as she tried to act like it wasn't a big deal, like she hadn't already known it would happen. And then, David's voice. "I've got it." 3 words. Simple. Direct. And then, after it was done, 5 more. "You're doing your best. That's enough." She had held it together until she got to the car. Mason was already asleep by the time she buckled him into his seat. That's when the tears came. Quietly. Not out of shame, but out of release. Because he didn't know what he had just saved her from. Not just the embarrassment. Not just the stress. He had saved her from a night of shame and spiraling thoughts. He had saved her from having to choose between food and gas. He had saved her from another quiet moment where she stared at the ceiling wondering if she was failing her son. David didn't know that his act wasn't just generous, it was life-changing. Emma stood and walked to the cupboard. She pulled out the peanut butter, the same jar she had nearly put back on the shelf. She opened it, made herself a simple sandwich, and sat down to eat it in silence. Every bite reminded her of what it meant to be seen in your lowest moment and not judged. That mattered more than she could put into words. After she finished, she rinsed the plate, turned off the kitchen light, and walked quietly down the hallway. She peeked in on Mason, tucked the blanket around him, and kissed the top of his head. Then she whispered, "We're okay, baby. We're okay." Because someone had seen her. Because someone had reminded her. It wasn't about the groceries. It was about what they represented. Hope, dignity, and the smallest spark of belief that she could keep going. And she would. It had been a week since the day in the grocery store, but Emma still thought about it every morning. Not in a dramatic way. It didn't sit on her shoulders like a movie scene or make her cry every time she remembered. But it was there, quiet, steady. A reminder that kindness doesn't always come with fanfare. That morning, she was walking up the stairs to her apartment when she noticed her neighbor, Mrs. Reynolds, struggling at the bottom step. The older woman was hunched over, one hand gripping a paper grocery bag, the other searching for balance along the railing. She looked tired, like the weight of the bag was more than her body could handle. Emma hesitated only for a second. "Here, let me help you with that," she said, already stepping down toward her. Mrs. Reynolds looked up, surprised. "Oh, Emma, you don't have to." "I want to," Emma replied gently, taking the bag from her hands. "You've got your cane in one hand and stairs in front of you. That's too much." Mrs. Reynolds chuckled softly. "You're too kind." Emma smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe I just know what it feels like to need help and not want to ask for it." They walked slowly up the stairs together, side by side. Mrs. Reynolds moved carefully, but she didn't complain. When they reached her door, Emma waited while she fished out her keys. She opened the door, and Emma carried the bag to the kitchen counter. "Would you like some water before you go?" Mrs. Reynolds asked. Emma shook her head. "Thank you, but I should check on Mason." As she turned to leave, Mrs. Reynolds placed a hand on her arm. "You're a good mother. I see how hard you try." Emma paused. Those words. She smiled, tighter this time, but with more weight behind it. "Thank you. That means more than you know." And as she walked down the hallway, Emma realized something. The words David had said to her weren't just meant for her. They were meant to be carried forward. Later that day, Emma and Mason walked to the park. The weather was cooler than usual, and the breeze carried the early signs of fall. Mason ran ahead to the swings, his laughter bouncing through the air. Emma sat on a nearby bench, watching him. A few minutes later, a woman with a toddler of her own sat beside her. She looked tired, the way Emma had felt so many times. The woman pulled a small juice box from her purse, handed it to her daughter, then sighed and leaned back. "You ever feel like no matter how much you plan, something still falls apart?" the woman asked, not looking over. "All the time," Emma said. "Today it was Mason spilling cereal down the front of both of us before 8 a.m. The woman smiled faintly. "It's hard." Emma nodded. "It is, but you're trying. That's what matters." The woman turned toward her. "Yeah?" "Yeah," Emma said. "I had a stranger say that to me last week. It stuck with me, so now I'm saying it to you." The woman blinked slowly, then smiled a little more. "Thanks," she said. "I needed that." Emma watched her daughter sip the juice box while swinging her legs, just like Mason used to before he grew into louder games and scraped knees. She didn't need to know this woman's story to know what it felt like to question yourself every day. Emma wasn't anyone special. She didn't have a perfect life. But she had a moment, a single sentence that had been enough to shift something inside her. And now she was passing it on. She didn't always have money, or time, or easy days, but she had kindness. She had understanding, and that was something she could always give. The seasons changed slowly. The days grew shorter, the air cooler. Emma swapped Mason's sandals for sneakers, his lightweight pajamas for thicker ones. The leaves outside their apartment window turned amber and gold. Life kept moving, but the memory stayed. It had been nearly 2 months since that day in the grocery store, but David's words still echoed in her mind. Not loudly, not constantly, just enough to be felt when things got quiet. When Mason threw a tantrum after daycare and she was too tired to reason with him, she'd pause, take a breath, and remind herself, "You're doing your best." When her car broke down on a rainy Tuesday morning and she sat in the driver's seat with her forehead resting against the steering wheel, she remembered, that's enough. The stress didn't disappear, but it didn't crush her the same way anymore. Because now, she held on to something. Emma didn't tell many people about what happened that day, not because she wanted to keep it private, but because it was hard to explain why it mattered so much, unless you had lived a day like hers. She'd tried once, over the phone with her sister, who lived 3 states away. "That was nice of him," her sister said. "People can surprise you sometimes." Emma agreed, but it didn't feel like the whole picture. It wasn't just that someone had paid, it was that someone had noticed. And being noticed, being seen, when you feel like you're fading, that stays with you. One Saturday afternoon, Emma found herself going through old boxes in her closet. Mason was at a friend's house, and for once, the apartment was quiet. She pulled out a small cardboard box labeled Misk. It was filled with random things, old receipts, a broken watch, unused birthday candles, half a journal. She flipped through the pages of the journal. Most were empty, but a few had notes from months earlier. Budget plans, grocery lists. Then she reached the pages she had written after that day. It's not about the money, it's about how hard you're trying. I believed him. I remembered I'm stronger than I think. Emma read each line slowly. She hadn't read them since she wrote them. But now, sitting cross-legged on the floor, she felt the weight of them again. And she realized those weren't just reflections. They were proof of change. Proof that words matter. That kindness doesn't vanish after it's given. It settles in. It roots itself. Later that night, after Mason fell asleep with his favorite storybook still open beside him, Emma stepped out onto the small balcony of their apartment. She wrapped herself in a blanket and sat on the worn patio chair, her fingers wrapped around a mug of tea. Above her, the stars dotted the sky in quiet confidence. The world didn't seem as heavy now. She thought about how many people walk past each other every day, never knowing the full weight another person is carrying, and how one moment, a single sentence, could lift some of that weight, even just a little. Emma didn't know if she'd ever see David again. She doubted it, but she often thought about him. Not as some hero or perfect stranger, just as a man who decided, in a simple moment, to be kind. He couldn't have known what he gave her that day. But Emma knew. He gave her more than groceries, more than money. He gave her something to hold on to, something that still stayed, long after the day had ended. And on nights like this, with nothing but quiet around her, she could still hear it. You're doing your best. That's enough. And now, she believed it. Not just because someone else said it, but because she had lived it. Years passed. The memories didn't fade. They settled into quieter corners of Emma's mind. Life had changed. She was no longer standing in grocery lines counting coins. She had found steady work, a modest apartment in a better neighborhood, and a growing sense of confidence in herself. Mason was 8 now, taller, louder, endlessly curious. He asked questions about everything: why the sky changed colors, why people honked their horns, why peanut butter never went bad. One afternoon, he found an old notebook in a drawer while searching for crayons. "Mom," he asked, holding it up, "can I use this?" Emma glanced at it and froze. It was that notebook, the one she had written in the night after David helped her, the one that had held all the thoughts she hadn't said out loud. She walked over, gently taking it from his hands. "This one's special," she said. "Let's keep looking." Mason didn't argue. He moved on, already distracted by something else. Emma stood there for a moment, flipping through the pages. She hadn't opened it in years. The handwriting was messier than she remembered, rushed and tired. But the words were clear. She read them again. Every one of them still true. That night, while Mason brushed his teeth, Emma sat on the edge of his bed. A soft breeze came through the open window, and the scent of freshly cut grass filled the room. "Hey," she said, "can I tell you a story?" Mason nodded, wiping toothpaste from his chin. "Is it real?" "It is," she said. "It happened when you were very little. You probably don't remember." He climbed under the blanket, eyes wide. Emma waited until he was still, then began. "There was a day when we went to the grocery store. We didn't have enough money to buy everything we needed. I tried to act like it was okay, but it wasn't." Mason listened closely. A man saw what was happening. A stranger. He stepped forward and paid for our groceries. Mason blinked. "Just like that?" "Just like that," she said. "But that's not the part I remember most." "What did he do?" "He looked at me and said, 'You're doing your best. That's enough.'" Mason was quiet. Emma leaned closer. "I didn't believe it right away. But over time I did. I really did. And I've never forgotten what he said." Mason looked thoughtful. "Was he like a hero?" Emma smiled softly. "No cape. Just a kind heart. That's enough to make someone a hero sometimes." He nodded slowly, his eyes growing heavy. "Why are you telling me now?" he asked. "Because I want you to remember that people matter. What you say to someone can stay with them. It can help them when they need it most." Mason yawned and turned on his side. "Okay, I'll remember." Emma kissed his forehead and stood. She turned off the light, leaving the door open just a crack. As she walked down the hallway, she thought about how a moment she hadn't seen coming, something so simple, had stayed with her all these years. It had gotten her through hard days. It had softened the sharp edges of doubt and guilt. It had reminded her that trying was enough. She didn't know if David ever thought about that day again. But she did. And now, so would her son. Because a single act of kindness, one sentence spoken at the right time, had echoed for years, and it always would. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.